Good morning, Chris. Long time no see. How are you?
I'm very well, Leroy, and very nice to see you again. Yeah, it does seem like a long time since we last saw each other face to face.
You have just come back from Tokyo on a trip to the Olympic venue of rowing of this Olympic in Tokyo with the Hong Kong team.
Yeah.
So I would like I would like to hear from you how is it actually like in Tokyo in the venue, and what do you think about the process and all that. But before that, I would like to introduce you to the audience. Would you please give a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Chris Perry, and I'm the head coach of the Hong Kong national rowing team. And I have been working as a head coach in Hong Kong since 1986, so a very long time. I've looked after all of the Hong Kong teams at all of the major competitions, the Olympics and Asian Games, and now aiming towards Tokyo, which would be my 8th Olympic Games leading the Hong Kong team.
I understand that you and the Hong Kong team went to Tokyo a few weeks ago, wasn't it? And what was this event actually in
So
Tokyo?
this was the continental qualification event for Asia and Oceania for qualifying crews for the Olympic Games. So it's the final chance for crews from those continents to be able to get tickets to go to the Olympics. So you have to qualify, have to meet a certain standard. So this was the race for that, and it was on the Olympic venue. And yes, one of a number of continental qualification events for rowing.
This interview is brought to you by GroupTiv. Do you find it hard to communicate with your team using messaging apps? Use GroupTiv to make announcements, send push notifications, collect RSVPs, share schedules and statistics. GroupTiv is great for sports clubs and associations. Download now.
As I can see in your background, you are now in a hotel room.
Yeah.
So the event was over and you have come back to Hong Kong where you live, and now because due to the Hong Kong rules you have to be quarantined in the hotel for 21 days, or
That's correct, yeah.
2 weeks?
So we have to stay in the hotel for 21 days.
Okay, I really appreciate people like you and yourself and all the officials and all the athletes to have to go through that. I mean, now that you have finished everything, you come back, you cannot see your family and friends for 21 days. It's
Yeah.
like losing your freedom for 21 days.
Yeah.
For sport.
Yeah.
I really think it's amazing that you guys are doing it. So can you tell us the whole process? Okay, in order to attend this qualifying event in Tokyo, so that your athletes have a chance to actually attend the actual Olympics in the summer, what was the process that you had to go through from Hong Kong even before you board the flight, and how does it work all the way to when you come back?
Yeah, so it was quite a complicated process. I guess the first part was that the Hong Kong government offered athletes an early option if they wanted to get vaccinated. It wasn't compulsory, it was an optional option, but in fact all of our team took that option to be vaccinated. So before the event, quite close in fact, we had the team vaccinated, and of course there were some concerns regarding that you do have sometimes a few days when you don't feel great afterwards, so we had to time that into the program. And then the official process for getting to Tokyo is that within 72 hours of flying, you had to have a COVID PCR test, which had to be done in a format which is recognized by the Japanese government and on a form certified by a doctor. And so, yeah, it was quite a process to get the team ready, tested, and fully equipped with visas. And that was the first stage, really, before we even had to get on the plane. And then the next stage, when we arrived in Japan, immediately you arrive at Narita, you also have to have a test as soon as you come off the plane, and you have to sit and wait at the airport until the test results come back. And then after that, there's a long process through the airport. They've kind of set up a lot of different stations. It's a bit like a mini marathon around the airport, where you have to go and the visa documents, your test documents, then you're tested, then you have to go and install various tracking and tracing apps on your phone, and they will check to make sure that your phone is operating and those apps are functioning. And then it took quite a long time for us. With Hong Kong classified as a low-risk country in Japan, it took us about 2.5 hours to get through the airport to the immigration point. But we heard for some teams who came from high-risk countries, obviously like India, there were more steps and they had to do more detailed testing and so on, and that took them up to 5 hours, and understandably. And then when we finally got through immigration, then we went to specially designated transport, and that transport took us directly from the airport straight to the hotel. And the hotel was closed off to the public and was set aside for this event. And
just for the athletes,
and officials, yeah. And every team, everybody had to stay in single rooms. So, normally our athletes would share rooms with each other, of course, to keep costs down and so on. So this time everybody had to stay in a single room. And the logic behind that is that if one of your team members gets infected, you don't have to withdraw the entire team as close contact. So by keeping even people from the same team separate in this phase, it reduces the risk of spread between individuals. But it was very hard because we weren't even, as coaches, we weren't even allowed to go to the athletes' rooms. Also, our physiotherapist couldn't go to their rooms. And in fact, basically, you were confined to your room unless you went for meals. So for meals, they had staggered meal times with each team having their own area. And during meals, that was the only time you could take your mask off. But then the rule was that you sat facing the front and you didn't speak while you had your mask off. You ate your meal and then you went back to your room. And in that period, because there were so many teams, there were 18 countries, so you only had 30 minutes for a meal because you had to rotate all the countries. So it was quite like a prison experience in some ways.
So I hope the food was reasonably good.
Yeah.
It was like you have Hong Kong team as a session, and then you eat with your own team, and then you get out of it.
Yep.
No talking. And then the next team comes in.
Exactly, and then
that sounds really safe. Then you completely isolated, really.
Yeah, and then from there, every day you would only be able to go to the again a designated transport, and then it was a 30-minute drive from the hotel to the venue. The venue is closed to the public. And each team,
no spectators.
Each team had its own area where they put their boats and equipment. We had rules about keeping distance from other teams. We didn't share tools or share equipment or get close to the other teams. Obviously, mask wearing everywhere. And the volunteers and helpers and people who were helping the event were divided into categories. So the ones who had to be in the same area as the teams were part of the bubble and stayed in the hotel and had to be tested in the same way. And the ones who were not directly having contact with the teams, those ones stayed in a separate area, and they had a separate access and a separate zone, so they wouldn't come into contact with the inner bubble. So in a way, you can say there were a number of like concentric bubbles where you were separating out different types of person. So again, it was quite a tight system.
I can see that, organizationally speaking, in terms of logistics, it must be a lot of work to make sure all the bubbles, all the different category of people, they don't get to mix, or at least if they have to interact, is at a distance, in the minimum amount of time.
That's right.
It must be a lot of work. It's amazing, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to ask a silly question. So I suppose you have gone through all this. So practically, you just go straight to the hotel and then stay in your room. If you need to talk, you have to do online meeting, and then you go to the race. And then after you finish the race, you go straight back to your room. So no sightseeing, no sushi or Japanese beef meals.
No, so
in the outside.
Yeah, so unfortunately, absolutely forbidden to go outside of the hotel. And you know, at the hotel, it was made very clear to all the teams that if you did go outside the hotel, that would be a sanction. Maybe the whole team would be excluded from the competition completely. So it wasn't like joking around. It was very strict. They were very kind because they employed some helpers who would allow you, if you wanted to buy something, as long as it wasn't, you know, frivolous, but if you wanted to buy something, you could order that in the evening and they would deliver it 24 hours later, so they would help you. So there was that sort of way that you could perhaps order some food from outside. Well, not really ordering food from outside, but some emergency things if you suddenly needed bananas for your team or that kind of thing. And the hotel made a good effort. I mean, they have to include food for a wide range of nationalities, as you can imagine, including Muslim athletes. So they have to provide quite a wide range of things. Of course, normally we would have a buffet, but again, because of the hygiene requirements, there's no buffet. So everything was served in like individual containers. Everybody had to wear gloves to pick them up. And it was all pre-packaged, but within that they did include some nice Japanese dishes. So you know, we did have a chance to have a few small Japanese dishes.
How long was it? How many days was it that you were in Tokyo?
We were just there we arrived on the 1st of May and we left on the 8th, and that was another requirement that everybody had to arrive on the same day and everybody had to leave on the same day, and that was allowing COVID testing. So we also did testing on day 4 before racing started, and then when racing was delayed we had to test again on day 5, and we also tested day 7 before we departed. So during the event also there were COVID tests being carried out.
I remember when I went to the Asian Games many years ago in Beijing. It was competition, of course. We wanted to do better in terms of the competition, but then once our games are over, we just go partying and go sightseeing, and then we stay behind and stay until the closing ceremony. So have you heard the arrangement in the actual Olympics? Are athletes allowed to, for example, stay until the closing ceremony, or they have to like go because it's a long many weeks, right?
Yeah.
Your event is done, you have to go back, or you can stay behind.
No, so the playbook, look, they've published an updated version of what they call the playbook for this games, and it looks pretty strict. So it's saying, you know, again, it's a bubble system. You're not really able to go outside, and also, yeah, you're supposed to leave within a day or 2 days of your competition finishing. You can't go and visit other sports, so you know, as we did in other games, you know, we'd go around and have a look at some of our teammates and so on. So that seems to be impossible. So yeah, it's not going to be the kind of experience that people normally have to go to an Olympic Games.
Well, that's too bad, but I think it's a lot better than not being able to participate at all, right?
Yes, I mean, I think for athletes who've trained for, you know, years and years, many of them since the previous Olympics, of course, you know, psychologically it would be a very big blow if the games could not go ahead. But of course, at the same time, I think all of athletes are not naive and they understand the state of the world. And I think, of course, that there's a certain amount of wrench in your mind about, you know, the games versus other priorities. And I'm sure every athlete thinks very carefully about that. And I think, you know, we shouldn't portray athletes as people who just want to have the games and they don't care about whatever is going on around them. I think most of them deeply care about everything, yeah.
Actually, since I've been living in Japan for more than a year now, actually what the policy for Japan until a few months ago was actually for most of last year, business travel was still allowed. Like if you can show that you have important business in Japan, you can still apply for a business travel visa, like even if you're from originally visa-free country. So there was to some extent people can still come in until maybe 2 or 3 months ago when they said, okay, we have to stop it. And relatives of Japanese residents, people like us who have a resident status here, if we have urgent emergency to go back to our home country to visit family, and we can still come back. And there are certain procedures that they make sure that everything should be kept to the lowest risk as possible. It's all about risk, right? So what you do is try to minimize the risk as much as possible. Okay, so just one final question. So I suppose your comments shows that you really appreciated all the arrangements and everything was good and up to standard. You feel it's quite safe, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, I think, in such a challenging environment, first of all, it was a tremendous thing for the Japanese hosts to step up and to agree to run the event. And it took an enormous amount of work behind the scenes. And this is against the backdrop of, uncertainty and we can say unpopularity in a certain extent of the games. But having said all that, if you were there on this trip as an athlete, you would never have experienced any sense that people were not wanting you to be there, that you were unwelcome. I think we received a true Japanese welcome. I think that people went out of their way to make us feel comfortable despite all the restrictions. And many of the volunteers were rowing enthusiasts from the clubs in Tokyo. And I can say that they did a really outstanding job. I have to give great credit. And also I know that there were a lot of discussions with the Tokyo government. The Tokyo metropolitan government was all over the event. But it wasn't easy. You're dealing with a bureaucratic background. But I have to say they just did everything they could to make it work, and I was truly impressed. And as I said, even teams from India, a very high risk country, were made welcome and were taken care of and were not treated like aliens or whatever. And I think that's getting unusual, around the world. If that had been in the US or even perhaps in Europe, I think we would have seen some kind of, potentially racist approach to some of the teams. And we experienced that ourselves last year when we were training in Europe and the COVID was just breaking out. And as Asian athletes, our athletes experienced some unpleasant situations. So I think great credit to Japan for treating everybody in such a good way. And whatever feelings they may have about it, they didn't share it with us.
Chris, I'm going to put Japanese subtitles into this interview. So if you have to say one thing to the Japanese public or organizers,
I think I would just say thank you for a wonderful experience. We know how difficult it was, and that you couldn't give us everything like the sightseeing and the Japanese full experience. But what you did was make us welcome and safe, and I think I will remember that for a long, long time as something really special. And I would just want to say thank you.
I'm sure when this is all over, you will come back and have a real good party with everyone involved hopefully in the near future.
Absolutely. There are many Japanese friends there who I've known for many, many years since I've been rowing in Asia, and it was sad not to be able to go out for the evening with them and enjoy a Japanese evening out, but I'm sure that I will go back and do that. Yeah.
Yes, let's all hope that this will be over and we can really go back to our normal sporting, enjoyable life. It involves not only competition, but a lot of friendships.
Absolutely. I think that's what sport's all about, isn't it? It's about that friendship element. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chris. I think it was really good, and I really appreciate your effort and all the other ones who are not only in rowing sport, but in all other sports. That I really hope the Olympics can go on safely, no incidents, and all the athletes can, for athletes, the ultimate goal, ultimate place to go to is the Olympics. So I hope people can actually have that chance.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be back again in just a short period of time, and we're of course making all the preparations now, and if everything goes ahead, we'll be back there again very soon.
And let's follow on TV. I'm sure we can see all the events on TV with cheering for our Hong Kong team, not only rowing but also other events.
That's great. Yeah, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Have a nice day.
And you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.